So I go get a job, and then on the job, the guy who hired me went to my church, and then also, of course, so he was the director of the company. My boss actually ended up kissing me one day at work.
Wow.
Okay.
And when I get back to work, the next day he IM'd me and was like, "Hey, Aqueela, I need to talk to you." And I'm just knowing in my mind, assumed, I just knew he was going to apologize. He's going to say, "Aqueela, I'm sorry." I just knew. I get into the office. I stand by the door closest to the exit because I'm just like, oh, this is going to be quick. And he goes, "Did you tell anybody?" And I said, "Huh?" He says, "Did you tell anybody about yesterday?" And I was like, "No." And he says, and it's almost like it was one fell swoop, but he walks up and I had a dress on. He walks up and he was like, "Good." And he just fondled me in the office.
Relationships matter. I need you to understand. Relationships matter.
Welcome to Relationships Matter. I'm Chanel Scott.
I am Josh Powell. Bringing it in a little different.
We have an amazing guest with us today, guys. Miss Aqueela Maddox, the inspirationalist. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to be here.
It's been a long time coming.
It is.
Yes. You know, you hear so often when God is doing something in our lives, most times we go into a season of isolation.
Well, it depends on how long too. You know, I think that if anything done in excess could actually become bad for us, right?
Yeah.
So if there is a place, and I think sometimes when we hear those types of principles, we apply them in excess. So we'll do like, hey, the Lord said I need to be by myself, and it's like a million years, but I don't feel like everybody's journey is the same. I feel like more than anything, really make it personal. So if you feel like God is calling you to be by yourself for 13 years, then let that be your journey.
Jesus.
Because I'm not signing up for that without no right instructions. You know what I'm saying? So, but everybody is not the same. But I personally do believe that, just being honest, I'm a Bible girl, but I mean, if you think about, let's see, even Moses, when he went off and feeling the way he felt about, aiding in someone's death, he ended up with a family. So he left by himself and came back with folk. You know what I'm saying? And when he went on the journey, he still had other people walking with him, right? It's just not many instances where a long period of time of just like years and years and years and years and years of being by himself, unless it was punishment.
God, that's something.
So I think that many times we have moments.
Yeah.
You have seasons, spurts of time, but I don't think it should be forever.
But being by yourself shouldn't necessarily mean like cut yourself off from the world too, though.
Agreed.
So I think, the context and the understanding of what we ingest is important.
Agreed.
You know what I'm saying? Because some people feel like, well, whether it's God or however, they're like, well, I just got to remove myself altogether. And it's like, no, that ain't it. You still need your family, you need your friends, you need the right people. Let me say that, because that's important. I don't want to miss that point, because you need the right people. But what got you into the work that you're doing?
I honestly felt like, I was minding my own business. And I felt this was something I was led to do because I believe I've always been very passionate about relationships just as a person. And then I felt like when the unction came to do it, despite my resistance, it did make sense.
What drove that passion? I didn't mean to cut you off, but you said that. What drove that passion?
That part I really don't know. I don't know if it was the fact that I was one of 8 children, the oldest of that. My mother is one of 16. I don't know if it's the fact that my mother was a communal person just in general. Like we move into a neighborhood, we gonna know our neighbors. You understand? We bringing the old lady down the street something to eat, and we're doing, whatever. Having my brothers cut the grass of somebody. I don't know if it was her or if I really believe this is just the way that God has made me to understand that this is a necessity. It's not optional for us to do life together.
Where do you fall in line in that 8?
I'm number 1.
So you're the oldest.
Wow.
So that's where that wisdom and that peace and that understanding and all those things come from, because you got 7 underneath you.
Possibly.
But do you feel that there were some other things that picked up from you being the oldest? Because a lot of times, right, where I'm going with this is, and you know, in our community, I could speak on that. The oldest, typically of multiple siblings, turns into the parent.
Mm.
And that could be a dangerous thing because they lose out on their childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm asking you, like, do you feel that you were kind of thrown into a position, or were you allowed to be big sis as everybody was growing up in your household?
I honestly think that it's a combination of both for me. I don't think the demand was as great originally. I think that, but I do also recognize that, rest in peace to both of my parents, but I do believe that there was some rough times in my parents' relationship. So I don't know who my biological dad is. I mean, if you know him, you know, pass him away. But aside from that, the dad I grew up with, though, that I've known as a dad, he and my mother had a very toxic relationship. Like, there was domestic violence and stuff like that. And with that being said, I remember thrusting myself into a position of protecting her and like keeping the kids out of their way to not add any additional stress to my mom.
Okay.
So I recognize that that's probably where people pleasing derived from for me as well. Trying to assess the room and know how people's moods are before it's actually communicated.
Yeah.
So that is what I believe I began to just kind of insert myself into. But as a child in and of itself, you know, what my mother, you know, really tried to lead was me being a young person. Did I help from time to time? Yes. But was I having to like keep up the household and stuff? No. My mother, having 8 children, was actually on welfare for a long time because what the daycare bill gonna look like besides me, all of the other kids are a year apart.
Wow.
Okay.
So daycare would have been crazy.
With the same dad?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
That's up.
Yeah, all of them. That's the dad I grew up with is the dad of all my siblings.
Wow.
So
She had baby back to back.
literally back to back.
Wow.
So if I was 10 or say 11, then the next one was 9. No, that's not right. It's 8. And then 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
You said the relationship was toxic.
My mom and dad. So
I'm wondering if that's how they could relate to one another. You know,
having babies and stuff. I think they had great moments. What's crazy is even when my mother passed first, we could tell, we knew our parents loved each other, but things like this, like the dialogue, the conversations, the resources was not really available to my parents. And going to church alone doesn't just make you good at relationships. That's you know, praying doesn't just make you good at relationships. So there's work that we have to do, recognizing personality differences and stuff like that. And as I got older, there's also places for you to, for you to actually take the back seat on some things, right? I believe personally, I was like, I kind of blame the Lord for, and God knows, like, so I'm not worried about being struck by lightning, but I believe it's God's fault why many of us as women insert ourselves into positions that we ain't invited to. I mean, just thinking about like Adam and Eve. Eve was this woman who was full of purpose. Imagine a call already being in a room. Imagine a need already being there before you got there. And as soon as you get there, what do most women do when you already know that there is a necessity in the room? You just go and start inputting yourself wherever you can see that there is a need. Right. So that's what essentially was going on. There was already a need in the room. So I believe innately it's in us to come in and try to be problem solvers. Well, the problem with that is sometimes we need to ask questions. Sometimes we need to take a back seat. We have to learn how to find what most people would call the balance. And I just kind of feel like it's find the appropriation of when to insert yourself, right? So my mom sometimes was such a leader, also being one of 16 children. Wow. Such a leader and all of that stuff that I found that, a lot of times if my dad would say, hey, this is what I think we should do, she'll be like, I think we should do this. And so they bumped heads a lot. And so it spawned into other things. So it wasn't, toxic in the sense that it was just like they just couldn't always work as a team and partnership. And again, that's why I learned partnership isn't something everybody understands. Even in my own personal dating experiences, I've learned that just because people have siblings and things like that don't mean they know how to share in the responsibility of something with somebody else.
I was going to ask you, why do you think, based on your observation, they couldn't? Because most times the woman, she followed the man's lead, and then if she doesn't, it's either because there's a lack of respect or they assume more of the responsibility, and so it's natural for them. So based on your observation, why do you think that is?
I think part of it honestly was lack of respect as well. I think there was some things that my dad did not do as a man, or how he didn't position himself, which affected how she saw him. Especially because here's what happens when we are, I believe we can have trained vision. So like, it's kind of like me being the church girl I was. It took a very long time for me not to be attracted to men on a pulpit, because I was in church every Sunday, right? So my mom seeing her dad, who worked every day, who managed 16 kids, who helped with kids and worked, then to have a husband who doesn't mirror those things, that was a struggle. She had an expectation similar to what she was familiar with.
So and that's really good. When we get back though, right, we're gonna take a break. I want to get you to talk about, because it's two ends to this, and so many people experience this. You said on one end, there's dysfunction, there's toxicity. But on the other end, you said, well, I know they loved each other. So when we get back, I want to definitely get you to break that down, see how these two go together. Relationships matter.
Relationships matter.
Welcome back to Relationships Matter. So we have Miss Aqueela Maddox, and before we went to break, we was talking about your parents in terms of, you said there was some dysfunction, and then they loved each other. And so Josh wanted you to break it down. So you can talk a little bit about that.
I believe that regardless of I believe love is the concept regardless. And what I personally believe is that it's really finding the love that I do believe in, being fruitful and multiplying. And we ain't talking about just baby making, because my parents had that in the bag. Okay, so that's not that's not it.
Right.
But being able to really come together and really advance their family. So could you love someone and it's toxic? Absolutely. You can be attracted to a person, you can love a person, and love can be developed and cultivated over spending time and conversations, you know what I'm saying? So after doing time, and all tenure doesn't equate to love either, right? So people spending years and years and years and may not have love at all, but they can function. But my parents, I do believe they started out, they actually loved each other, and they grew to recognize that they weren't the best partners, but they stayed. And that's where I believe it becomes toxic. It's kind of like, if you think about like these cleaners. So I can't remember them, but I'm just going to, for the sake of the example, let's say Clorox and Ajax. They're both cleaners. They're both set to do a task, but let's say that the chemical makeup of the combination of two will bring us toxicity that can actually be damaging to the lungs of the person ingesting it, right? But they have good functions, both of them separately. That's what I believe.
Separately, though.
Separately.
But not together.
But not together. And that's what I believe toxicity looks like in relationship. You may be two wonderful people separate, but when you come together, you're not as progressive. You're actually doing way more damage to everybody in the atmosphere.
Can you fix it, though?
Can
it be fixed?
Ooh.
Do you think it's an issue of compatibility, or... We talked about lack of respect, but is it something that can actually be fixed?
I want to say the answer ain't that cut and dry. You know what I'm saying? The reason why I would say the answer is not that cut and dry, because what does one's willingness to do work look like? Right? So what work needs to be done? But at the same time, if I do all the work in the world and still we are producing the same outcome, is that fixable?
No.
It's not. So that, to me, when I have the privilege of coaching couples, I tell people, as much as I'm in the business of keeping you together, I'm actually more in the business of keeping you productive. So if it's more effective for you not to be together, I'm not going to lie and just be like, I think you guys should continue to work at scratching each other's eyeballs out and tearing up each other's soul. And then you're now putting each other in a position where you ain't going to be no good to the person that you might actually do better with, or your children being subjected to that environment.
But do we call that love?
Well, the thing is that you can still love somebody and be in a position where you're not showing the love that is best for you. That's what I'm saying. They don't start, you name a person that started out being toxic. They don't always start out that way. A lot of time, I said don't always, Josh. Okay, listen, Linda.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Listen,
that's why
I just
said,
think
that's
it's
why I asked you
it's a good ask. You know what I'm saying?
but you know, that's why I asked her the question, if they related through sex, because like situations where it start out toxic, it's because they have great sex,
and I get
but
it.
then everything else is dysfunctional.
And I mean, but that can't be the lead either, because I mean, there's some people.
I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that that's
right,
what
because
it is.
I'm saying because when I go with my religious self, and I used to go interview other couples, and they started out with great sex and been married and happily married for 50 years. I'm not.
No, it can turn out good.
That's why I said it's the details that matter. You know what I'm saying?
The
details matter. Like, you know, how are you guys doing as a couple? Are you able, if in the event that I'm sitting over here and you're sitting over there, we both getting stuff done, or are you too busy worrying about what I got going on and I'm too busy worrying about you? That's not effective. That's not productive.
Right.
But that's why I was asking, like, because I understand what you're saying, right? But I feel like some people might take that, because when you grow up and you see certain things, and then we always say, well, we knew they loved each other, but it's like when you love, is that really love? If you're gonna treat a person that way, if you're gonna show up for them that way, is that love? You know what I'm saying? And that's why I'm asking what I'm asking, because I do, on one end, understand what you're saying, but for somebody that sees this, to not confuse it, because if we're gonna call it love, then what does love look like? And it can't look like these things over here if those things over here are damaging. So for me, like,
Is that
that's
a
what I'm
healthy
asking.
love will probably be the question.
And
Is that a healthy
and that's fair
love?
too. But is that,
Because
why are we
you
even
can-
labeling it love? You see what I'm saying?
I do understand, but I believe that, to me, we live under the umbrella of assumption. Like, we assume that everybody just knows how to walk in love. That just because a person says love and have a feeling and emotion, that they don't need to be educated or taught. So that's my personal belief. I can
agree
love
with
you,
you.
and I need to be educated on what does this really look like for me to walk
Or
this
how
out.
to love that person.
That's exactly right. And I feel like that's why I said, when we live under the umbrella of assumption, that's the reason why, to be honest, if I meet you and you don't know, I'm like, well, you should know, right? But the reality is, everybody don't know what it looks like to walk in love.
Right.
Meanwhile, back at the ranch, if I be the Bible thumper that I am, and I believe, right? I believe Jesus was demonstrating why, because we didn't know. If you believe in Jesus, and even if you don't, and you believe in something that provides some version of an example that you subscribe to, it's giving you a demonstration. Why? Because we don't know. We don't just we're not born innately doing all the right things. How is it that children who have never been taught sin know how to lie? They know how to hide. They know how to sneak stuff. How is it? They weren't taught that. So in the same manner, I have to teach you that that's not good behavior. I have to teach you that the way, how, if a kid never seen, which I've seen, children have never seen anybody fight, and all of a sudden they fighting the kid for the toy. You have to teach them, hey, this is not how you show. This is not how you ask. This is not how you request. And we think because people are tall, I just call them taller. They're just tall children. Despite popular belief, there's a lot of tall children running around here just because they pay their own bills and got their house in their name and all this does not mean that there's not other areas of their life that they don't need to be educated in.
I agree.
And love is such a responsibility, and it's delicate. We don't treat it like it's delicate. So everybody handles it, and everybody can pass it around and decide to, want to, sign up for it. And I say it's interesting. You can get a driver's license and it requires education, but you can get a marriage license just because you want to.
And
there should be
again,
education.
I'm not, it should be education, but even for some people, they're still going to do what they're going to do. And then even for those people that aren't educated, you still know what doesn't feel good.
Absolutely. But
So
at
that's
the
why I
same
was
time,
asking.
But some people don't even know what doesn't feel good. To give you a good example, being very honest, right? My daughter's dad and I are not together. My daughter lives not right now with her dad. And I'm grateful we've come a long way. But there's some times where he said things and he'll be like, well, fine, if you feel that way, then go live with your mom. And he says it's a joke. And I told him I don't really like the joke, because it's not a good joke to make with her, right? And he's very receptive, and we have these powwows because he tells me, he's like, Aqueela, I can't tell you just because I'm older than you that I know everything. But I ended up talking to him, and I told him, I said, the reason that it's imperative for you not to do that to her, because see, we began to practice being okay with pain. That's what being callous is. It's familiarity with pain. So people can deal with stuff because they're used to it. And you still telling them, well, don't do what doesn't feel good. What do you mean? But I've produced a callus that now puts me in a position where this isn't that painful anymore. That's not even a good way to judge anymore. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Or the mindset of, if I don't deal with it in this situation, I'm just going to deal with it in the next situation. Like,
there you go.
Anybody, they're going to come with some level of dysfunction,
Or
pain.
problem.
So let me just choose my poison.
There you go.
You know, so you stay and you tolerate it because you think that that's what it's going to be. That's
what you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
That's what you're supposed to do. That's what it's the kind of stuff that we train. So I began, to tell my daughter, I said, it's not acceptable for someone to manipulate, because that's what that is really equivalent to say. And it wasn't, it was the thing because, he loves his daughter. He doesn't want her to leave. He wants her to stay there. But if, she's going to combat that with, no, Dad, I want to stay. Right. Well, I don't want her to think that that's normal behavior. And then she gets in a relationship and some guy is like, well, if you don't do this, then I'm leaving. And now she's trying to prove her worth again and convince them to stay by doing whatever it is. So again, if she's used to it and she keeps becoming familiar with it, my daughter, in the environment of, let's say, her dad, then how does she know that that's not a good behavior if we don't teach her? Because again, I don't believe that just love and relationship alone is something that we just know what to do because we're taught.
We don't.
But subconsciously, we're still behaving in a way that we understand it doesn't feel good.
I can't disagree with that.
That's why I'm challenging that, because even to the point that you made, like, and it was a valid point, but it's like, okay, if that's what we used to, then we just gonna keep this brokenness going.
No, we gotta.
We're gonna keep
agree.
jumping in relationships. We're gonna keep dealing with people, and we're gonna keep saying these things, and then we're gonna label it as love versus labeling it what it really is.
I see your point, but here's what I also recognize. You can love someone and still decide that that's not a good position for you.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree with that.
So what I'm stating is not to pacify somebody being in a toxic relationship, but it's okay for me to recognize, like even with her dad, I loved her dad at one point, but I recognized that was not fruitful for us to be together. Our communication was misfiring all the time. And I tell people, just because we speak English don't mean we speak the same language.
I want people to recognize. That's why this part of this conversation,
But I think it's also good to teach people to make hard decisions.
100.
Because that's what I think, that's what equates to me. Can you recognize that you have attached yourself, you've fallen in love with someone that you now recognize ain't even good for you no more? Make a hard decision. Come on, let's be an adult.
So that again goes back to like what I was saying in regards to like love in general, because for one, if you love yourself enough, you're gonna do what's best for you. Right?
But see, you talking about loving yourself and versus loving someone else as well.
But I'm saying, because we can't forget about that too. And then,
Agreed.
and then in regards to loving the other person, you can love them enough to say, you know what, this, even in regards to how you're doing with me, like this is not where it's at. And allow that person to your point, make the necessary decision.
Agreed.
Grab that tissue for me. We're going to have more when we get back. Relationships matter.
Relationships matter.
Welcome back to Relationships Matter. So I'm going to pivot the conversation.
Okay.
We've talked about your parents. We talked about how it impacted them, in terms of their relationship.
Yeah.
Talked a little bit about love, toxicity versus love versus toxicity. I want to talk about how has some of what you've observed in the past affected your own personal relationships, and how has it played out?
So one of the ways that it affected me is because I would say is that I never wanted to be somewhere and be miserable, like my parents. So I would say, and I said miserable because the constant back and forth, the arguing and things like that, trying to get on one page, I was like, ooh, I don't ever want to deal with that. Now, as a result, it's made me a professional quitter.
Oh, wow.
Where, honey, because if I start seeing things and I'm not, and when I say a professional quitter, like for all, that's kicks and giggles, but in real life, I want to observe and I'm never, ever, ever, first of all, above reproach. So I'm never in a position where I'm like, oh, I'm always the one and it's everybody else and not me. We'll stick a pin in that. But I do know that, like you said, right, even learning. So when you talked about real quick self-love and different things like that, I learned that there was a necessity of self-love because I looked at my parents. And again, I believe sometimes, the love that people have for one another is usually serving each other and ourselves. And so I had to, to me, I had to figure out, like, how do I position myself to where I can be in a relationship? My love is giving and it's serving, but it's also serving me as well. Instead of me just constantly showing up with this selfishness, because a lot of times we'll just stay with people because they feel good to us and feel familiar to us. But we recognize we probably stifling them, they stifling us and all that stuff. So how do I position myself to not do that? And so I would, I would pray honestly, and I would read my Bible and stuff like that, and just reading what I felt was giving me some version of an example that I didn't feel I had at home, to be able to recognize, like, wives, love your husband in the same way, and husband, love your wives. I mean, wives, respect your husband, and husband, love your wife, and different things like that. And the way that it began to educate me to give space for my husband to be a man and a leader, and without having two cooks in the kitchen, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, well, dang. I remember talking to my mom one day and I said, Mom, do you think that sometimes the argument would decrease if sometimes you would let Daddy have his way, And she was like, oh, Aqueela, that's not what it is, But I felt like, sometimes somebody, for the sake of for the team to win, it may look like or feel like you're losing. But somebody got to concede,
Yeah.
So I was like, I want to learn how to do that. I want to learn how to not be so headstrong that when I get married one day, my husband can, we can be on the same team and I don't tear my family up doing it.
Right. But what do you think caused that, though? What do you think caused people to be, do you think it's competition between the two parties, or what do you think caused that?
I think it's a lot of stuff, because some people, as therapists will often say, which I am not, but they will say all the time, like, of course, things are stemming from, like, your childhood. Like, if you feel like you didn't have a voice. So I felt like I didn't have a voice. I was very quiet growing up. So at times, and in fact, that can segue into, like, literally, like, my own relationship. So I didn't have a voice. And a lot of times when people don't have a voice and then they get a voice, they're constantly exercising their voice. And then they don't know when to kind of quiet down because it took so long to get there. And I understand that.
Yeah.
But then there's some people who, there might be competition. Some people who finally, I worked so hard to do all of these things, and I'm not going to let you, whoever you is, tear that up. So I'm going to constantly stay on, stay on top of this or whatever. And I'm not letting you have a say. So there's that.
I can identify with that in terms of, for me, for so many years, I didn't practice self-love. Like, you couldn't tell me I didn't love myself during those times.
I get it, girl.
But then when I arrived at a certain point, I realized you didn't really love yourself. And it was evident because of the situations that I kept finding myself in. So when I finally got to a place where I learned to love myself, now I got to stand on business on everything. I got to be like, no, I ain't going to be treated like this. This was going to be. And, and it doesn't always serve me well.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? But because I didn't do that for so long, most times in situations I would overstay my welcome.
Yes.
And in the process, I'm getting broken down, right? That can break you down. That can really do damage. And so it's just like, I look back at that now and I'm just like, you gotta find a good balance.
You do.
You don't have to stand on business. You just make a decision and you go with it, but you don't have to stress it all the time. But that is one of the things that I am guilty of. I'm like, for so many years, even my other show, ministry, like one of the reasons why I established that platform is because I didn't have a voice. I heard you say not having a voice, right? And I wanted to be able to speak freely about some of the issues that I'd encountered in past relationships or situationships. I wanted to be able to talk about it, and I wanted to talk about it with like-minded people.
Yeah.
And so that stemmed from that, but it's just about really finding like a good balance. So I just wanted to put that in there.
Yeah. I think, again, it's a lot of learning and unlearning I've had to do over my journey of, adulting. So I got married very young, grew up in the church, real heavy. And while I have no resentment there, I would have done things a bit different. But I got married at 18 years old and I wanted a family. Let's be clear. And, dear future husband, that hasn't changed. And so anyway, it has not changed. I still definitely believe in family and being a wife and serving and loving my family in every way possible. Meanwhile, I did start my family young, 18 years old. My husband at the time, and he, still is a phenomenal guy to this day, but we was a dynamic partnership and duo. Again, not having proper resources and education and training grounds, I went into that relationship not having a voice. And some of that probably came because my mother was very boisterous, and I felt like that's what affected, in addition to my daddy's issues, that's also what affected their ability to be a partnership, right? So it was a combination of already being shy, seeing my mama be very boisterous, and maybe that's a part of her contribution. Because as a girl, who do you think I'm watching the most? My mother. So, and I saw my dad do things like I said, but it was still like, okay, I'm looking for how to model myself. So in my marriage, I got married, we were married about 7 years, and then not having a voice and not being, I wasn't a stand on business kind of person. I wasn't a very confident person. I didn't even find myself like attractive. I was very like, neutral about everything, if I'm honest. And so my husband, I thought, was the only man in life who thought I was like beautiful and who wanted me and all this other stuff. So with that being said, I was a hustler, you know what I'm saying? So I was doing daycare. I was laying laminate wood floors, doing electrical work, whatever I could, and did hair. Okay, whatever could break our family, go ahead. Next minute, I got tired, and I said, babe, I think I need to go get a job. And he said, okay, cool. I said, just to get a break. So I go get a job, and then on the job, the guy who hired me went to my church, and then also, of course, he was the director of the company. And I wasn't at work the day when I guess he made this announcement that he was hiring a group of people. And so some friends called and was like, girl, he's just letting everybody basically in, and the pay is good and all this other stuff. And I was about 24 years old. And I was like, oh, okay. So my husband and I talked about everything. And I, asked him, did he approve? Was it good? And he was like, yeah, that sounds like a good opportunity. You should go for it. So I go for the job. I'm being my regular, like, barely showing up in the room self, and not realizing that smiling and being kind and just like, hey, good morning, I don't know if it was taken as an invitation or what, but my boss actually ended up kissing me one day at work. And I didn't I've shared this testimony so many times, and people are like, but did you kiss him back? No, I did not kiss him back. And he was 5'4". You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
It's like a drive-by. You understand? Literally. Like, he literally kissed me, no lie. And I just like ran the opposite direction, because I'm thinking, you're married, I'm married. I know you saw this ring, as small as it was, amen, on my little 24-year-old budget, amen. You saw it, okay? You saw it. Like, what is happening? And so that's when I learned a few things. The ring is only a signal. It only signifies the marriage. I got to defend it, but I didn't know how, because I ain't had no voice. So when he did that, the next day I go back to work, and I get an IM, instant message, and he goes, hey, and I didn't tell anybody. So I'm talking to God all the way home, and I feel like, and I'm not giving nobody no permission to lie, but I feel like in that moment I began to understand, like, this must be why people lie. Like, because I was afraid, my chest was hurt, like pounded. Like, it was a lot, anxiety and all the things. Yeah. Like, I'm used to being honest to my husband, telling him everything. I was like, I ain't telling him. I'm dying with this. This guy, I'm going to die. Meet the Lord, and we'll talk about it at the gates. I'm not. And when I get back to work, the next day he IM'd me and was like, hey, Aqueela, I need to talk to you. And I'm just knowing in my mind, assumed, I just knew he was going to apologize. He's going to say, Aqueela, I'm sorry. I just knew. I get into the office. I stand by the door closest to the exit because I'm just like, oh, this is going to be quick. Mm-hmm. And he goes, did you tell anybody? And I said, huh? He says, did you tell anybody about yesterday? And I was like, no. And he says, and it's almost like it was one fell swoop, but he walks up and I had a dress on. He walks up and he was like, good. And he just fondled me in the office. So that was the beginning of what I've shared as an affair. And I take responsibility for the portion where I should have been able to defend my relationship. And
not just your relationship, but yourself.
Myself, yes, absolutely. And I'll be honest, that's even a reflection, if I'm honest, of how small I saw myself. Like, it wasn't me that I saw in that moment. It was my marriage. Mm-hmm. You understand what I'm saying? So it's not even, it was like, I wouldn't want this for me, but it was more than anything, I wouldn't want this for my relationship. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. And I never said anything. And then every day, whenever he felt like, it would be an invitation to do that. And it just...
And he never asked you how you felt about it, or had a conversation?
I think at some point he probably did, but to me, I feel like I have to go along. Like, I'm not I wasn't a person that was confident enough to be able to go against the grain. And then I learned that was also like the detriment of people pleasing. When you're a people pleaser, you'll please people in every environment, even the environments that are not good for you. Like, I was like, well, I don't want to get him in trouble. Then I'm going to get me in trouble. Then I'm going to get everybody in trouble. It was like a whole bunch of these really convoluted thoughts that may not make sense to nobody else. And I tell people in a heartbeat, I'm not here to defend it. I know exactly what I was thinking and feeling in the moment. It was convoluted with all these thoughts that none of them were stand up for yourself.
So I have a million questions, but we have to go to break. We'll continue the story when we come back. Relationships matter.
Relationships matter.
Welcome back to Relationships Matter. So you just laid something heavy on us. But before we get back into the story, I got to ask you, Joshua, why didn't you jump in?
I don't want no parts of that.
Why?
I think I done talked enough about my cheating ways enough on this show.
So what you want to give her the floor now?
Passing the torch. Especially because there's a woman sitting over there, so hey.
You're crazy.
He said you can have this one. He said
I don't want no pause, but I will say this before y'all go into, because this is a serious thing, and this is something that unfortunately many women deal with, and that young men deal with as well. And it's just not to villainize. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can say the things that you're saying now because of the maturity and the growth. But a lot of times, you know, the person that's in that position at that time, it is tricky. You know, I know the things I went through in my childhood, and I was just like, well, I guess this is normal. Like, I would say those things to myself as well. So it's like, I felt what you were saying from a different position too, because I found myself back in the townhome. I found myself in the bedroom in this situation, in the closet in this situation, or at the strip club when I was 15. You know what I mean? I found myself in these different spaces, and the one thing, because to somebody who's listening that's probably in that position or knows somebody that's in that position, is grace and being supportive, and for the person to be okay. You know what I'm saying? Because I couldn't imagine what that felt like, because the other part that's crazy, especially people who are powerful, they can manipulate a situation and they could silence you even more. And that right there could be even more damaging than the fact that you kind of just took it and just kept it moving. Like, everybody's situation is so different. I had a homegirl, like, where that happened to her, and she was silenced all the way because she did come out, and nobody believed her because her boss was that guy.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And then she messed around. She got raped. Like it just led to other things, and then it got so bold. It's like, yo, pull up, and she thinking she pulling up for something else. Bro, just jump down on her. So it's dangerous. Like, and it's painful to hear that, especially me being a father now. Like, it's just so tricky in how people play that, and it's unfortunate. And you see these things happening. You see the media blowing up right now without us naming names, because people are behaving in a manner, and it's very, very damaging.
And this is my question, like, that situation is like, as an adult, how do you allow those things to happen? But what I wanted to ask you was, did something happen maybe when you were a child that
No.
Okay.
And again, what I learned through my experience is that it's just everything is not that simple.
Okay.
Everybody's like, oh, well, as an adult, how do you not say nothing? Well, if you've never been shy and you don't know the anguish that I struggle with to even speak to you, then you would never be able to relate.
Right.
To standing up for yourself. If a person don't like confrontation, because that used to be me, where I won't confront a circumstance. I would rather eat the discomfort of whatever it is, let you be right, let you project, let you yell at me, let whatever happen, than to try to create resistance in the room. I'm going to just keep it smoothed out. But remember what I told you growing up. When my parents were going at it, I want to smooth things out. I'll be the one to take the brunt of the issue. I'll take the responsibility. I'll keep the kids quiet. I'll do whatever I need to do to not further worsen the circumstance.
Right.
And it resurfaced just in a different way.
In a different way.
In a different way. So,
And interestingly, two things. My dad called my dad was actually one of the persons that I leaned on heavily in that season. My husband, he decided, he said, I can't do it.
so you got we didn't even get to the part where you shared with him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you skipped.
Girl, I
Go
lied
back.
in spurts, honey. I lied in seasons. Amen. I'm just being honest. Telling that was hard. Are you kidding me?
So did you
I
voluntarily
gave him a little
tell
bit.
him? Okay.
No, so cell phones wasn't a thing.
Okay.
They ain't got no phones to check, nothing like that. I think the boss emailed me and asked me, was I coming to work one day because I was late. Now, he didn't know my business. He was a director. So I don't report to him directly. So I report to the manager.
Okay.
And what I later thought about years later was that was him trying to still see if he's ahead of getting in trouble.
For sure.
Because I was late. But my boss knew I had an appointment and all
So
this.
why is the director reaching out
Do
to
you
you?
see what I'm
You're
saying?
Not even the direct
and at the
boss.
time, I didn't think nothing of it. I'm thinking like, well, why is he reaching out? And I didn't. But later in life, literally years and years and later, I was like, he was probably trying to see if I had quit the job or whatever the case, or was going to tell on and whatever.
He probably was molesting children, that type of behavior.
I don't think children at all. That's a far stretch. But what I'm going to say is that, to be honest, I had got word that this wasn't his first occurrence at work.
So talk about, how did your husband find out? What happened?
Girl, email came. That's what I told you.
So he
emailed, and my husband and I shared an email.
Okay, and so...
We was besties, me and my husband.
But that wasn't telling him that something inappropriate
Yeah, it was,
happening.
because why are you emailing his wife?
But he was the director.
But why would you email his wife? You ain't never had no reason to
But you
email
work
his
for the
wife today.
company.
That you ain't never emailed his wife. I'm just telling you the reality. You ain't never emailed his wife. And so my husband was like, baby, something going on? I'm like, huh? What? No, absolutely not. Lied through my teeth, girl. And at that time I had a gap, so it had plenty of room.
Oh, wow. So how did you gradually let him know?
I was like, and I'm being serious. I'm making light of it now because I'm in a place where I can laugh at the things, and we still talk to this day. And I'll never. He knows I'll never not be sorry. I'll never not be apologetic. I'll never, be okay with the pain that I caused him in the separation of our family. But we can laugh and make jokes and stuff today, and I'm grateful for that. Shout out to you, Mr. Shannon. But he literally, like I said, it was kind of like how kids be when they be like, when they did something wrong and they pull you into the corner and they'll be like, could you come over here? Like, I don't want to tell you in front of everybody else. I want you to come. So that's how it was. I literally was like, I had to find a moment of like silence and isolation where nobody was around. So if you blow up, it was just going to be me and him. And so I told him I had something to tell him. We had moved to Arizona at the time, and that was my idea. I was like, well, we wanted to move somewhere, but I was just like, I met cousins down there, whatever. So we moved to Arizona. But anyway, while we were in Arizona, I thought that would be a time to tell him, because now everything's done and out. You know, the guy had left and I've gone. And so I thought this would be a time to tell him. And when I told him, of course, he was absolutely hurt and livid and furious and everything. And I just gave him like a little bit of the time, and, you know, honestly. And he was like, is that everything? And I'm like, yeah, lied. And then he was like, and then I was like, okay, the next day, you know, despite popular belief, I have a conscience. It's just, it was painful to share all the things. And then because I took responsibility for all of it, really, because I felt like I should have been able to speak up. I should have been able to do what they do in the movies when a person kiss you, smack you in the face. I have never smacked a person in my life, even today. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I don't hit people like, so this idea that if I ever got in a situation, I remember telling myself how this would go. Like, you know, if somebody ever did something, we can sit in these seats and be like, if that ever were me, and I'm not saying that somebody may not actually be telling themselves the truth. If that was me, I would do this. Maybe that's your reality. But in my reality, when I sat there and said, if I ever got into a situation where somebody did this, I would smack them in the face. I wouldn't dare. So when I, you know, how it went versus how I thought it would went was not the same. And I explained all of it to him. And he felt the same. He was like, I just feel like you should have stood up for our marriage, you know. And he was like, you know, why didn't you tell somebody? And I could have protected you. You didn't even tell me, you know. And I was like, I couldn't. It was hard. I couldn't say anything. And then we didn't have, at that time, you know, again, being heavily in the church, the only sins that existed in church that were outspoken, I should say, were people on drugs, alcoholism, drugs, and I think that was probably about it. That was the only things that I heard people give testimony service about. You know what I'm saying? So therefore, how do you go share with your church family or anybody that you need support in this area? Because even though it was more than likely had happened, people weren't talking about how to recover or how to work through this or asking questions and navigating that kind of circumstance.
Question, have you and your ex had the conversation about that recently?
We've had it several times by now.
What's your most
It's been
recent?
like 20 years old or so.
Right. But what's your most recent?
We don't talk like all the time, but I mean, we probably talked about, to be honest, in what capacity?
Just anything.
I mean, like I said, we can make jokes today. So if he, you know, somehow, or even just a thought of it, you know, if I heard him, sometimes when he's talked to me about his own circumstance, and I may say, you know what, I'm really sorry, because I feel like I aided in you having a wall up in your, you know, in your heart or something. And so that could have been a month ago.
So the reason why I'm asking is because if it comes up, right, to show where y'all are really at, just if he could turn back the clock, would he do anything different?
He does. He says that.
What did he say that he would do that would be different?
He said he would have asked more questions and think and listen objectively. And then he said he wouldn't have automatically just go straight to divorce, because that was what his
Because it
option
seemed like
was.
he
went
made
straight
you,
to-
he didn't see you as a victim. When I hear you talk, he held you accountable for that.
Yeah, but so did I. That's why I was saying, like,
Yeah.
I felt like I'm supposed to know better, do this, control this better, blah, 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 blah.
And you guys
or
had
something.
moved and you were out of the situation. It wasn't like you was
Oh, yeah,
presently
correct.
in it. You guys had moved, relocated, some time had passed, and he still wanted to do a divorce just based off of something that had happened. I don't know how long before, but
Probably months, to be honest.
yeah.
Probably
so-
months.
But the other thing to point out too is, like, you know, with infidelity, you know what I mean? Not to excuse any of the behavior, right? Because, you know, somebody ends up being hurt and all of this. But what makes, like, work infidelity so unique and different is, like, that's your livelihood on the line.
Agreed.
When something happens, you know what I'm saying? So I wanted to ask that because it's like, does the grace meter go up a little bit more? And I know y'all say y'all joke, but are those jokes really coming from a place of healing, or is there a little bit of hurt behind it too? You know what I mean? Because you just never really know. And because if he's really in that place that he's in, then he shouldn't have his wall up and doing some of the things that he could be doing currently. Not saying that that is or what isn't, but just based off of what I think I heard.
No, today I think, honestly, like that's, like I said, I feel like if I heard, because I don't know everything, but if I heard him in any way and I feel like, I'm like, ooh, it feels like you got a wall up or anything that I feel, my point is I feel like I was the catalyst for that, right? And although I may not have been all, because when I met him, he had already had his own, past or experience that, relationship didn't work out or something like that. And again, remember, I met him, I was 16 years old. This is the first and only man that I'd also been with, by the way. So to be with him only and then probably be with another man could have been another pain point. You see what I'm saying?
But does he correct you if you do say that?
Oh, he does. He does correct. He wants me to not feel the burden that I more than likely still feel today. Mm-hmm. He's gracious and he's kind. It's not like, he's like, he doesn't hold me in a way that makes me feel small. He does not.
Let me ask you a question. Knowing who he is today.
Absolutely not.
Would you?
Still shout out to you, Shannon. No.
Seeing how he turned out as a man.
Yeah.
Would he still be your pick 20 years ago?
You thought I was playing when I answered you before your question came up? Absolutely not, sugar. Okay. No, and it's because of who I am today. Mm. He's a phenomenal man today. He's great. He's just really great. And many people are going to be like, and that's why she ain't got I don't care. Because at the end of the day, it's who I've become. When we're talking about being fruitful and multiplying, it's who I've grown to be.
So you don't think you guys can be fruitful and multiply together?
Today. I think, communication-wise and things like that. Again, we don't do life in a close proximity. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. We co-parent. That's about it. Mm-hmm. So we don't do life close proximity. We care about each other as people because, again, we've known each other for so long.
But you said he's a good man.
He's a good man, absolutely. But I won't.
But you can't do life with him.
I wouldn't do life with him in a romantic relationship, Josh.
¿Por qué? ¿Por qué?
Josh.
¿Por qué?
Inglés.
Dime, ¿por qué?
Inglés.
Why?
Oh.
Why not?
Because I just told you, we do life close enough to where I'm like, I'm not attracted to him as a person. But I think that you can meet a whole bunch of good people. Josh, you gonna date the people you meet that are good, that you're not attracted to in whatever ways you're not attracted to them?
I might do something else.
See what I'm saying? And that's where we got toxicity.
You asked me to be honest.
And that's where we got toxicity, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, so we gonna come back more with this queen. Relationships matter.
Boy, are you crazy? Why
Listen,
are you saying? Why are you saying?
Relationships matter.
Welcome back to Relationships Matter. So during the break, ironically, you talked about how, I don't even know what to call him or how to refer to him, but he called you to apologize where when men heard your story, they literally attacked you. And I find that to be so, it's just so it's an oxymoron. It's backwards because you were a victim. Like I hear people say, well, even you, Josh, said she took accountability for her wrong, but she was a victim.
Well, I just think that just share your experience with that. Because no matter what growth you've had, it still has an effect. It has an effect on how you view men today, mm-hmm. your dating process. Mm-hmm. And again, this is coming from somebody who's doing the work. That's what I'm saying. People got to understand how one moment or multiple can change the trajectory of a person, of their thought process, of, how they viewed relationships, whatever, mm-hmm. But it was unfortunate, but I just wanted you to share your experience in regards to blame and shame and all of that stuff.
Ooh, so so I was sharing that for one, I remember saying I never, ever want to share this with anybody because shame and blame was definitely, for one, blame of myself and shame is what I already had of my own. Mm-hmm. And then to share it with somebody, I've shared it and let's say I shared it in a small room and which has happened. And then the women might say Dag, I would have never told, or not my husband, but just how do you have the confidence to even say that? and I'm trying to get through it. I do believe that we overcome by the word of our testimony. So I felt like every time I talked about it, it became lighter to where I didn't want to be still feeling my body hot and face turn red every time I talk about it. So I've told this story several times, and the men would be like, no, you just trying to find a way to blame, and you probably wanted it, and ain't nobody going to do that to you, and you don't let it happen, and you don't want it to happen, and all that. Because I mean, plenty of women, if I try to kiss them, they gonna push me off, and I'm like, I understand what you're saying. And in a circumstance that I probably was more invited, like let's say I'm talking to a man and I'm dating and we feel comfortable and this, that, and the other, but in a circumstance where I'm completely caught off guard, I have no expectation for what's happening, that is not how I responded. I literally froze up. And when I'm in that office being fondled, I don't move. Like so
that's just like, it's almost like touching a dead person.
And meanwhile, but see, here's what's crazy. I remember watching somebody on the live and I burst out in tears because it explained what people who have never been violated and don't understand that your physical reaction is not always the same. Everybody, we're not the same. But this woman she's a therapist, and she was breaking down how your body can still do all the normal things. You can still be turned on, you can still ejaculate, you can still climax, you can do all of the things and still be, because it's not, and it's involuntary because the body is still made the way it's made.
Right.
And you can be regretful that it looks like your body is accepting of this moment, and even though your mind and your will does not want to be here. So it's not that simple. It's not as black and white as you shoulda, coulda, woulda. And so it allows me to have compassion and understanding. I understand the burden of pressure, where you can become susceptible to doing something because of a pressure you feel like a person is projecting on you. I just became sensitive to, many situations that, again, even in my own, in fact, I've owed some people some apologies. Because again, sitting on my wonderful lush couch where life was different, I would tell people like, well, I would never let so and this happen to me. And I've owed some apologies out because it's easier said than done many times for a lot of different things that people are not in the circumstances and you're not wired the same. So it wasn't but years later he did. I was still in Arizona, and I got a Facebook call before I knew that you can like block those notifications, and he called. And I was like very shocked. So out of the shock alone, I answered and I was like, hello. And he was like, hey, I'm just calling. Are you good? And I was like, I'm good. Like, are you okay? What's going on? And he was like, hey, I won't keep you long. I just want to tell you that I'm sorry.
So he called you on Facebook?
On Facebook. Yeah, he didn't have my number. So he called me on Facebook and was like, I'm sorry. I just want to let you know I'm sorry for messing up your family and, for ruining your family, ruining your life. He said, that wasn't my goal.
Well, you should have said, what was your goal?
I didn't have any other words after that. I just said, I hung up. That meant a lot to me because of the version of responsibility that I take. When you grow up with, hearing that you got to be accountable, you're going to find a reason to be accountable, even in the things that probably ain't even your fault. So that's what I was doing. My whole journey was, well, what could I have done different? That was how I saw it the whole way through. Well, I should have stood up for myself. I should have stood up for my marriage. Like I said, my marriage was probably at the forefront of even seeing myself. And not even thinking that a man would want to even touch me outside of my husband, to be honest. I didn't even feel that way. Like, I really did think like my husband was like the only man who found me attractive. And truth be told, that's still been a journey as well. Learning that I'm still attractive today. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, I went and got braces. That's my own personal choice. But when people say like, oh, I think you're beautiful. And I'd be like, me? But there was some beauty that I did not feel that I possessed for a very long time, regardless of what anybody else saw.
But you're beautiful, right?
Oh, today, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, today, okay. Absolutely. Yeah, no, but sincerely, I do believe I'm beautiful today. It's not just outwardly as well. I do feel like I honestly bring the dopest energy because like I was telling Josh before the show, when you slice me down the middle, I'm what you get. All atmospheres and rooms, okay? I'm not going to be fake for nobody. I'm going to be me, and that to me is the beauty I feel like that I possess.
Do you still have some pain left?
Huh?
Do you still have some pain left?
Do I still have pain left?
Yeah.
Well, my pain be different in this season, Josh. My sister committed suicide. My dad died 8 months after that. My mom's gone. A sister-in-law passed. that's the pain of, that I work through today. And then grieving and being single. Like, I never wanted to be single forever, and I feel like that's been the journey. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, somebody was like, well, do you think you're healed enough now to date? And I was like, that's an oxymoron, because grief, I think, is heavier alone. If I had someone that I could share life with, I believe, honestly, depression wouldn't have lasted the way that it did. I think grief would have looked different, because I would have had and I'm talking romantic partner, because my village is solid.
Mm-hmm. So outside of, family and everybody else, like, is there still something left within you that is painful or broken?
You mean outside? You say outside of losing family?
Outside of the people that
that I've buried.
Because you said, well, my pain is there, but I'm directing it back to you. Is there anything that you could think of that is extremely heavy on you from past that is still present?
I would say there's residue, because at times, very, very, very quick drive-by moments, and I do believe all thoughts are not our own. I do believe that there's negativity that can definitely present itself. But I think every once in a while there's a drive-by thought that maybe something that took place 15 years ago attributes to why I'm single, right? Mm-hmm. Like if Karma didn't show up by herself, she showed up with a family reunion. Okay,
I agree with you on that.
I mean, that's how I be feeling. But meanwhile, I know that that's not the reality. But every once in a while, and I know that's not the reality.
How do you get past the drive-by? How
do I get past the drive? You have to be honest, you just have to recognize they are what they are. If you believe in the Bible whatsoever, anybody, listening, and Jesus was standing on the mountain and Satan said, hey, if you the son of God, why don't you throw yourself? That was a suicidal thought, but it wasn't his own. So I believe that there's just things you have to learn how to talk back to. So I talk back to my thoughts, and I tell my thoughts like, it's a lie, because I've dated some really great people, and then sometimes it's their pain points that keeps us from being together, right? Because I know there are women out there, even if it's like, a circumstance like my own, that presented a pain point in their life, and they've got to work through that, right? So at the end of the day, I do believe that that's not honestly why, this journey has been what it's been.
So
but
let me ask you this. So you're confident in that, you believe that it's not a punishment.
I do.
So why do you think you're single?
Girl, because people are weird. They weird out here, girl. They are weird. And I say weird because, like I said, I've met some really great people, and I'm saying weird, but honestly, I met some really great men. I've dated some great people. I've been in, a couple of relationships with great men, and I kid you not, I tell people, you can check my receipts. They'll be like, Aqueela, great dating experience, but, my distrust in women makes me not be able to go any further with you. Or another one, I thought, and it's also interesting, and I know we're going to be wrapping up, but I found that I was also, because I had an affair, and I had that experience, that if I met a man who was a victim of a woman cheating on them, that this gets to be my opportunity to correct my wrong. That I get to love a man and show that I'm trustworthy, I'm loyal, and that I'm, more responsible, or whatever it was.
It sounds like you're still trying to make up for
That's
something.
what I was telling you. That's what I did for a minute.
Okay.
I did that for some years.
Wow.
And I was like, once I learned the story, I'm like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to restore myself. You see what I'm saying? So some of the relationships, that I was saying that I have is, I don't feel like they were punishment, but I believe it was the view that I saw myself in, and having to come in and be the answer to people's problems that they didn't ask for.
So you weren't attracting the right people?
That's
maybe?
what I think, yeah.
Well, to finish this thing off, for one, I definitely think it's important for victims and people that are in these situations to talk to somebody.
Agreed.
Go to a police station. Even if you secretly, because you can do it now, where you can spread a tweet from a crazy account and put names and information if that's what you choose to do.
A fake account, you mean?
Or your own. If you feel like you ain't got the strength or whatever, then put something on your story. And I don't know. I just want people to, and I know it's hard, and please hear my heart on this, because I'm not coming from a place of not understanding. I know my own experience. I've heard your experience. There's, people that have had experiences in this room. But the silence is so deadly.
It is.
And finding or figuring out a way to be able to communicate the things that we're going through. And it doesn't have to be this traumatic. But the silence is also deadly too, because we accept the way people treat us and the behaviors and all of those things.
Agreed.
And we don't speak to it, and we don't hold people accountable. And then the villainizing, like, to those men or whoever, like, shame on all of you. Because you should know, being a man yourself, you should be wanting to protect and provide. And that doesn't mean that there aren't some women who do behave that way, but that wasn't your situation. So I want to kill that narrative right there, because I do understand that there is that side to it, and it can be tricky.
Agreed.
When a woman is playing that game. I can speak from that personally. When they want to smear mud on your name to gain something, for you to be able to do what you're doing now, the work that you're putting in, I want to salute you. And I could see myself, and it took me back to when I was 10. It took me back to when I was doing whatever when I was doing it. And just me giving you that level of grace and understanding, and understanding that the amount of strength that it takes for you to be sitting here today, to even want to share, and recognizing that there are probably still, some smudges here and there.
Absolutely.
Because it's not easy, right?
Agreed.
And not just with that, like, everybody in this room, we all got smudges.
Agreed.
The problem is people don't recognize them, or they choose not to recognize them, because they rather just accept the behavior and just say, hey, this is who I am and this is why, versus actually peeling back the layers and doing the actual work to begin healing and being your best self. I don't like every day, like, waking up, like, I'm tired too, you feel me? Like, I ain't even gonna hold you. Like, there are days I don't feel like it. There are days that I'm just like, bruh, but I keep pushing, because this is my cross, my burden to carry. And I'm getting that strength from the Creator in order to do so, but it's not easy. So everybody in this room is dealing with something that they're keeping quiet or closed, and there's healing in just expressing, even just that little bit, just by doing that. And even if you don't have no one to express it to, write a journal. There's so many ways that we can communicate and express whatever it is that we're going through, to make people ask questions, to try to figure out stuff.
But I think what helps is you. So thank you so much for your support and wrapping your arms around me in a way that, like I said, it's not been a long journey where people were like, do you realize that this was something that you were a victim of? This wasn't many years of that. Majority of the conversation was always my responsibility, because we automatically assume that, again, adults know all the things, they know how to handle every circumstance, and none of that is true either. And that we all think we all have the same reactions, right? So I think that, to me, what is really, when I look at the evolution of, life as it's changed since then, for me, the conversations are happening now. This stuff happens at church. Like I said, this man went to my church. But I think a lot of times too, it was projected that young girls were after older men. So that was also something that, it was an automatic, like, assumption. So that made me also be like, well, I can't say anything because they're going to think I'm over here trying to pursue this person. But being able to know that there are places that, people will say, nope, I'm willing to hear, what the experience was, or be objective instead of automatically telling somebody that they're wrong, is what I believe opens it up. So I thank you all for, just being supportive in any way. And while it is aged, like I said, there's never a day that I don't feel, if I could change something, sometimes I say I wouldn't change this because of what I learned on the other side, but the pain that I remember going through, I would really want to erase it for the sake of the pain that I did experience, and that I also caused. But yeah, so I think that's what helps. Like you said, if anybody is experiencing this, if you've gone through something where, you find yourself in a position, know that the conversations are happening and people are definitely open, and take advantage of that.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Queen. Much love to you. Relationships matter.
Relationships matter. I need you to understand. Relationships matter.